Hi and welcome back to the cottage. Today we are discussing the top 9 decluttering mistakes that people make, as well as the practical ways to avoid them. Anyone who has learned a new skill will tell you that mistakes will happen on the road to mastery. And it can be helpful to recognize the pitfalls that may come your way to both mentally prepare and possibly avoid them altogether. And that's what today's video is all about. If you are starting a decluttering or minimalism journey and you're right at that beginning point with all of the excitement and optimism of how it can change your life for the better in the future, consider these 9 very common mistakes that people have made so that you don't have to. The first mistake is simply not understanding what clutter actually is. Most people will be able to recognize when their homes are feeling overwhelming and sense when they need to make a change. But when they get right down to try to remedy the problem, it isn't as simple as just throwing some stuff out or moving it around. When clutter is involved, more thought needs to be taken. And what is clutter exactly? Well, the answer to that question is going to be different for everyone. While an outsider looking in might point out someone's collection of coffee mugs as the problem, they may actually be that person's prized possession and not clutter to them at all. I've done a couple of videos where I talked about items that could be considered clutter, and it didn't surprise me at all that not everyone agreed with my list. For example, to me, wall clocks are just not necessary in my home. I have no need for them. But for many people who commented on that video, they pointed out that they look at their clocks multiple times a day and they are very useful. And if that's you and you look at your clock all the time, then that's great. The wall clocks in your home are not clutter and you should not get rid of them. Simply put, clutter is something that you need to decide for yourself. If you are annoyed by an item's physical presence, you never use it, have a difficult time taking care of it, or are bothered every time you see it, that item is probably clutter to you. Another very common mistake is holding on to things because someone else told you to or because of guilt. Guilt tends to be a stronghold that can have you holding on to something even though you've identified it as clutter in your life. Think back to the times you have received something as a gift, for example. Always be grateful that the person doing the gifting has thought of you and wanted to bless you in some way. That is a beautiful thing. But if the item you received isn't something that you actually want to keep, it can put you in an awkward situation by making you feel that you need to hold on no matter what, because of your worry that the person who gave it to you might find out and become offended. Now that might be the case for a very small percentage of gifts given, but for the most part, when a person gives a gift, they're really just looking for the smile on your face or the recognition of appreciation that you have, that they thought of you in the first place. They're not going to be checking up on you months or years down the road to make sure you still have that item. That's just a figment of your imagination. Sometimes though, you might face situations that aren't as cut and dry, where a relative or a close friend gives you an item with instructions to keep it in the family or take good care of it. And that's when the guilt really feels thick. The best advice I can give if this is a scenario that you are dealing with is to, number 1, don't accept the item in the first place, doing so in the kindest way, of course. Or, if you already have possession of the item, let the person know that your intentions are that you will not be holding on to the item any longer, and ask them if they want it back. If they aren't willing to keep the item themselves, let that fact release you from your guilt and let that item go. Overcomplicating the process is another big mistake that I see people making. This will make your progress especially slow. If you feel like you need to do everything perfectly the very first time from the very beginning, you're going to give yourself analysis paralysis. My advice, just start. Let your instincts guide you on what to do. Grab a garbage bag, grab a large box, and sort a small group of your belongings. I think it's best to start either with a category or with a particular area. But for your first time out, give yourself maybe 30 minutes to an hour tops. Just go through the things that you had planned and do some sorting. The garbage goes into the bag and the items that can be donated or sold go into the box. It really is as simple as that. Avoid the temptation of trying to do too much too soon. This is just going to give you decision fatigue and further stall your motivation to keep going. You've heard many times that one of the biggest hurdles you face with any project is just getting started. The same goes for decluttering. You could sit around for days, weeks, or months just trying to figure out a plan of attack for your clutter, but during that time, no actual progress will be made. And it can be pretty disheartening to look back on time that has passed and realize that you are in the exact same position as before. Just start. Mistake number 4 is not taking time to reflect on the reasons why the clutter accumulated in the first place. When you first start a decluttering process, it's easy to get caught up in all of the excitement. It feels great to be doing something that you have chosen to do for yourself. You feel in control and hopeful that this is going to be a life-changing moment, and it absolutely can be. But after a bit of decluttering has happened, it is important to stop and do some reflecting. It's a mistake to avoid this step. Now, why not do this reflection before you start? Well, I think that as you go along, you're likely to see some patterns that weren't apparently obvious before. You might recognize, for example, that you have many items that still have store tags on them, and that could indicate that perhaps your clutter has accumulated because of overbuying. If you find a lot of random paper items stashed away, lack of organization and filing systems may be your main problem. By paying attention and identifying those reasons that the clutter has found its way into your life, you're less likely to repeat those mistakes again in the future. It is also important to realize the differences between decluttering and organizing. Trying to organize before enough decluttering has happened is a very common mistake. Cleaning, decluttering, and organizing are all completely different things and, in my opinion, need to happen in a specific order for ultimate success. You can't really organize until you have decluttered your belongings down to the things that you actually want to keep and plan to use. If you try to organize too soon, you will only be moving things from spot to spot, and any systems that you try to put in place are going to fail because you're going to continue to overstuff these spaces. Declutter first and then organize and clean for optimization. Another mistake that happens often is being afraid of making a bad decision. When you commit to a decluttering process, you are committing to making hundreds of decisions, and through those many decisions over the course of months or years, it's likely that at some point you're going to declutter something that you later wish that you had back. It's just a fact. It's going to happen at some point. But if you worry so much about making a mistake, you're going to end up holding on to a lot more things for just in case or maybe purposes. My best advice to counteract this mistake is to think about the scenario if a bad decision were to be made. What is the reality? Is the item going to cost a lot to replace? Or will it take a lot of time to replace? If the answer to these questions is no, then be bold and just make the cut. The peace of mind that will come with releasing a clutter item from your life will far outweigh the need to replace it later if that is needed in the future, which again, it might not ever be. If this still seems too scary, then consider keeping a test bin or box where these questionable items can be kept for a predetermined amount of time. I recommend no longer than a year. And when time has expired, if you realize you've had no need for these items at all, you can have a lot more confidence in letting them go. Sabotaging your own efforts can be a costly mistake. Here's the thing, decluttering, it takes a lot of work. It's a chore, and it's the type of chore that most of us would rather not do again and again and again. You would hate looking back a year from now and realize that you have just as much, if not more, clutter than you did when you first started the process. That would be completely defeating. One of the fastest ways to sabotage your own efforts is to continue to thoughtlessly bring more in. In order to be successful at decluttering, you're going to have to curb your accumulation. It truly will be an impossible journey if you continue to bring more in than you let go of. The good news is that there are a few simple ways to keep from falling into this trap. 1, set boundaries on your belongings. Once you have determined the amount of any one type of thing that you plan to keep, the amount that feels comfortable to manage, set yourself a limit. Now, this might be done in several ways. You might have a basket that holds the entirety of your shoe collection, a shelf where all of your books are kept, or a certain number of hangers that are dedicated to the number of clothes that you want to keep in your closet. You make the decisions on the quantity or physical space that you want to allocate, and then make it a point to respect those boundaries. Another easy tip is to continually trade one for one. If you're out shopping and you see something that catches your eye, you first can ask yourself if you have the space based on your boundaries, and if the answer is no, ask yourself a second question. Which item is going to be leaving in order to make room? This will ensure that you never end up with packed boxes, drawers, bins, or whatever, trying to squeeze in just one more item. The eighth mistake is giving up when your decluttering efforts get off track or you're feeling a lack of progress. Decluttering, just like living a minimalist lifestyle, is a journey, and journeys take plenty of time. You don't just wake up one day, realize that everything is pared down perfectly, and never have to put in another second of effort. That doesn't happen. I've been living a minimalist lifestyle for 8 years now, and I still declutter. Granted, it's not as intense as it was when we first started out, but it does still happen. Just like any new habit or lifestyle that you're trying to adopt, you might get off track from time to time, during a busy season, a stressful time, or simply because you lost focus for a while. Don't use those moments as an excuse to give up and stop altogether. Remind yourself why you are doing this important work. It's because of a choice that you made, and you owe it to yourself to continue on. If you get off track, then give yourself some grace and just get back to work. Which leads me to the final mistake that I want to talk about today, and that is not taking time to appreciate all the work that you have done. With a long journey, it can be easy to become discouraged by the grind, and if you still have a long way to go, you might end up taking for granted the progress that you have already made. I always recommend to take pictures or videos in spaces before you do any work, and then another series once you have accomplished a bit of progress. This practice will make it so much easier to visually see the transformation that has taken place. But pictures don't always tell the entire story either, and so it can be helpful to keep a diary or journal of sorts to record your thoughts during the process. Write down your feelings of frustration as well as your stories of success and look back at them often. And the best way really that I've found to avoid the mistake of not appreciating the progress that you've made is to actually spend time in the spaces that you've already decluttered and spend time interacting with the things that you've chosen to keep. Because after all, one of the main reasons why we declutter is so that we can eliminate that excess in order to elevate the important things and to truly enjoy your things and your home fully. Be sure to make time for that. If you can minimize these 9 mistakes, your enjoyment and success in the decluttering process is sure to be much greater. I'd love to encourage each and every one of you along the way. Be sure to stick around this channel for a new video regarding minimalism or simple living every single week. Thank you so much for watching today's video, and I hope that you'll stop by the cottage again really soon.